Welcome to the Unedited Podcast.
There it is.
There's a good welcome for him. I feel like, so the podcast is unedited, but we've been talking without the recording being pushed for like an hour
For
now.
an hour.
So,
For an hour.
yeah.
So
a lot of time.
There's a lot of unedited left behind.
There's a lot of stuff going on right now, but I want to welcome you to the show today. Excited that you are with us. If you don't know what it's all about, Heights Unedited is a podcast where we get to dive deeper into our weekend message, and we get to have real conversations about life, and we get to answer any questions you have that are real questions about life.
Yeah. So let me ask you.
Yes.
We are, I think it's 10 episodes. This is the 11th.
11.
Is that right? What's your favorite part of this so far?
It's got to be the questions.
Yeah.
I think it's really fun the messages are great. We speak the messages on the weekend. That's awesome. But we've already spoken them. You know,
Right.
I love being able to answer questions that people are dealing with, going through in their life, and they're, maybe don't know where to turn.
Yeah.
So, we get to talk about those
I would
things.
agree.
So,
I would agree. I think the questions to me just make faith real. So that top line you've got about our intro of what this is hopefully is.
Yep.
I think I'm the same place where I hope that it feels like somebody's sitting down and having coffee with us and we're just having a conversation.
That's right. You got your coffee. I don't have mine because I don't drink coffee. Right. But we do want to thank all of our listeners / viewers, and we are so grateful for you heading into this Christmas season. We're in the Christmas season, but heading into Christmas just highlights how grateful we are for you guys and for everything that you've done for this show. But I do want to say, if you haven't rated and reviewed the show, please do it. Make sure you are rating it and giving us those ratings and reviews. We do have a rating that we're going to talk about in a second.
Matter.
They do. They matter because we want people to know that they can get real answers to real questions about real life.
Yeah. Well, and if you enjoy it, let
us know.
When I get a text message I enjoy, I give it a little thumbs up.
Yeah, there we go. That's good. We do have one coming in, a 5-star review from Rachel, and
5-star. Well, you only asked for 5 stars, so
I only asked for 5. But this is highlighting some of our YouTube viewers. So most of our, our listeners are either YouTube or they are on the podcast app, which is more just listening. But Rachel watches on YouTube, so she emailed her review.
Okay.
So here it is.
Okay.
Rachel says, I can't explain how amazing and blessed I am to follow Heights Church, to watch the podcast every Tuesday on YouTube. It's what I look forward to after a long weekend.
Oh, that's so great.
I know. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it makes it worth doing. Makes it worth doing.
Well,
knowing it's a blessing to somebody.
Back to your question, what's been 11 episodes in, what has been part of hearing the feedback from our listeners and viewers has been awesome.
It's so good
to go. This has been beneficial because I'm like, man, we're just going to sit in a room and talk, and it's been really beneficial. So
I was telling you about a guy that was telling me this weekend, like he listens to it in 10-minute chunks because that's how long his drive is. And by the end of the week, he got through it, and he was just saying how good it's been. And, it is encouraging. I wonder if this is Rachel from Tucson. I see her in the chat on YouTube on like the live stream.
Oh, on the weekend services.
On the weekend. So I'm part of the online family, but just see her. There's a Rachel that's in Tucson. So I was just curious if it's the same Rachel.
Maybe it is. So. Well, again, rate, review, help us out by sharing it. Also, want to let you guys know that if you want to listen to us over Christmas, you can go back and listen to previous episodes, but we won't be releasing any new episodes. This is the last one of 2024.
It's a winter break.
Well, we're going to take 2 weeks off, and then the next episode that we release will be in 2025.
Do you know what date that is?
2025.
That's as good as it gets.
That's what I got for you.
It's so good. I was just curious about, because of having surgery, if I'll still be on meds at that point.
Oh, yeah. We love Hi John.
Yeah, that'll be a fun conversation. Could go anywhere.
We never know what's going to happen when Hi John shows up and he's here to talk to us. So
who knows?
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But
so we are off for 2 weeks. That's
off
the important
for
information.
2 weeks. That's what you need to know. As we are getting closer to Christmas, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's crazy. We're getting ready. We were in the room at the Prescott location after service yesterday. Okay, got to give a shout out. If you were at the 11 o'clock service and yesterday we asked them to stack chairs. Right. So I did the last host spot. So I get done. I walk in the back. Hans, who plays guitar, was shown as a picture of him without facial hair. Like it was, I don't even remember the date. Like it was a long time ago. And so it's just one of those fun moments. Got done with that. So it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. Walk around into the garage door to help stack chairs. They're all done.
Wow.
Like it was crazy.
That's
people
awesome.
stayed, people did it. They did a great job, but it was just a beautiful thing to see them do it. So with that, yeah, we're in there tearing the room apart. We took down tons of lights. We took down curtains, screens, all kinds of stuff, getting ready for Christmas. So
that's exciting.
What is important though, if you attend Heights on the weekend, we're still doing weekend services.
Yes.
They are going to be a little different this weekend. They're kind of stripped back, aimed at just the family, intentionally because of the amount of effort Christmas Eve and Christmas Eve and Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, so. Christmas Eve, which, by the way, if you are listening or watching and don't know, we have services the 23rd and 24th at 2 p.m., 4 p.m., and 6 p.m. So there's 6 different
they're all
options.
Identical.
All the same service. There is 6 different options to get to. And then my favorite part, I know the service itself is going to be amazing. You're going to want to be there. But my favorite part is always just how well the entire family can be cared for and loved at our services. Yeah. So
that outside and everything surrounding it, each person's been thought of. So if your grandparents are with you, well, there's a bistro. They can sit down, have a bowl of soup, and you can slow down and be with them, right? Like
listen to some Christmas carolers.
Christmas carolers will be there.
Yep.
It's a surprise this year who's doing it.
Wow.
It was a last minute surprise, which is really cool.
It's not me.
I'm not going to spoil it.
It's not me.
It's not you? It could be. You just don't know
I just don't know yet.
We're speaking of how's it going, Mr. DR.
Mr. DR. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind the last 4 days. We did a
Wednesday night,
4-day trip to the Dominican Republic. Me and Pastor Bob just got back last night at around 11 o'clock at night from the Dominican.
Wow.
And
you're awake
awesome.
right now.
I'm awake right now. Yeah. I don't know if I had enough time to adjust to time change or anything like that. It was crazy. It was a whirlwind. Definitely tired, but such a good trip. What we got to do is, if you remember any of our viewers or listeners, a couple months ago, we had the students from the DR come and lead our service. And so we got to go to their graduation, and it was just
so cool.
So cool. Got to meet some of them. Bob had been down there before, so he knew most of them. The ones that I knew were the ones that came up for church a couple months ago here. So seeing them and just meeting more people and being involved in their graduation. I show up to the graduation and each person that came from the US was paired with a student from the Dominican.
Oh, wow.
And they would go on stage and get to talk to them.
Okay.
And Bob knew his student. He was speaking for them, excited about it, told me about it. Well, I was just along for the ride.
That's pretty cool.
So I'm like, this is cool. I get to just show up. And I show up, and Nelson, who's in charge of the whole program, who we supported for years.
Nelson was here a couple of weeks or months ago.
Nelson comes up to me and he goes, hey, one of the students, the person who's supposed to be here for him isn't here. Can you go speak up for him? Like you've been assigned to him. You're now going on stage to speak for this guy at this graduation.
And you don't know him.
No, I never met him. I was like, I can do it, but can I please meet him right now? Because I do not know. So, Juliel,
that's so
if
great.
you find yourself, he didn't speak a ton of English, so
which might be good because then he can understand what you're saying. Or?
Well, they had a translator, which is a whole nother ballgame. I've never spoke with a translator.
Hard. It's so hard.
Yeah, it was.
Some speaking styles it fits really well. Some it's mine is really hard because I just go.
I felt like fish out of water.
Yeah.
I was not.
And then you have so long to think of your next line.
Well, I know, and I'm up there, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I mean, not that how I presented matters in any way, shape, or form, but I can just imagine that people at this graduation were like, this guy probably never been on a stage before. I'm like, well, actually, I do this for a living, but it was so bad.
But they were all crying because they're like, oh, he knows him so well.
Yeah, they're like, oh, he knows this guy so well. I'm like, well, I don't know what to say, but
that's one of my least favorite things, and one of my favorite things about any kind of like overseas mission trip type thing is you never know what you're going to get asked. The minute they know you're a pastor, it's game on. You can be asked to preach in
impromptu,
like 20 minutes notice. Like you show up for the service, they begin singing. The guy leans over and goes, hey, you're going to speak this morning.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, that little side road for us there, but got back from the DR.
Trip was good.
Trip was incredible.
Relationships
amazing.
built, which is cool.
Yeah, super excited. Excited
our family.
to go
it's our
back.
Extended family.
Yep, it is. It is very much so. So, anything else we want to talk to them about Christmas at Heights? Now that we've jumped around from that,
man, I think if you know, right? So like if you've been before, you kind of know what to expect. If you haven't been, then without spoiling anything, there's something for everyone.
Something for everyone.
And the goal is, I said this this weekend hosting, but like Christmas, we just can't emphasize it enough. Christmas is the easiest time to get somebody to go to church with you that's never been to church.
Yep.
And that's what I love about it. But I love that as a church, we know and understand that, and we want to be intentional. And so everything outside is designed for them to feel love before they even ever get into a service where we're telling them about love.
Yeah. That's so good. I saw the statistic this week that said 85% of people that they polled, they asked, hey, if someone invited you to church, and they're talking to non-church people, someone invited you, would you go? And 85% of them said, yeah, I would.
85%?
Then they did a study that found out that only 2% of Christians actually invite their friends to go. 85% of them would say yes, but only 2% are actually inviting. So I think we can do better.
We can do better.
I think we can.
We can change those numbers.
All right. Well, we do have some questions that we want to hop into. Again, if you have any questions, I know you'll get some over the next 2 weeks when we don't have a show. So I expect to have our inbox full of questions. You can email those to unedited@heightschurch.com and ask any of those questions.
You're getting so smooth at just sliding that right in there.
Sliding it right in.
Heightschurch.com.
That's what I do. But we do have a question from Erica. She says, first off, I want to say how much I enjoy this podcast. Thank you for taking the time to answer questions and give me a new perspective on life and faith. Erica, you are welcome. Question awesome. Though, she says,
that's awesome.
I've been running into a lot of social media posts where many are saying Jesus was not born in December, but sometime in the spring. I'm confused about this. Can you help me understand?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I think for me, this is just first thing that comes to mind here in the question is social media has got an agenda and it's driven in a specific direction, right? And so what the kind of opposite anti-God kind of, the enemy wants to drive is, can I make you question something?
Right.
And so I don't know anywhere that, at least in my faith or in any of things, maybe for you can vouch for this too, but anywhere I've ever preached, right, or talked or taught or had a conversation, I've never been adamant that December the 25th is the day that Jesus is born.
Right.
Like I don't have a scripture that I go to and go, no, it's on this day and it has to be this day, right? Like, so I feel like we step into this long history, this long church history that within that there's rhythms and there's a world, right? And so the world around, celebrates different things for different stuff. And I think one of the beauties of the church is redeeming something.
Right.
And so within this question then, right, like helping you understand the concept of spring, to my understanding, and I just don't go and research this because it's just not what fills my tank, so to speak. I'll do it if somebody needs an answer. But for me, the idea of spring is when the shepherds were in the field, right? They were in the fields at night. We know that. They were watching their flocks. And so there's some of that where it had to be a certain temperature for that to take place. So that's where spring comes in, right? Like, well, they had to be out in the field and it had to be at this time. December's too cold.
Yeah.
So that's where
there's kind of a window of times that the shepherds would take their flocks out.
Yeah.
Then there was times where they were hunkered down in a barn or wherever going, hey, we're not out.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you've seen those fields.
Yeah, I've seen those fields, and it makes sense even just looking at the topography, I guess is the word of looking at where it is and stuff. And there's just times of year that would be better to be outside. And so, traditionally you look at the calendar and go, this is the window. Yeah. If they were out there, then that kind of excludes about 4 or 5 months, December being one of those that it could have been. So it wasn't December. I think also realizing where we got December, because you're like, how did that happen? It's like you said, it's the redemption of a other day. So December 25th was a pagan holiday. Yeah. And it was
people hear that though, and they freak out, right? Like, wait, it was a pagan holiday?
It was, but the church then decided like, hey, we're going to recapture this and redeem this day. And we're just going to choose this as the day to celebrate Jesus's birthday. Right. And so then we got this.
Which I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because if everything around you is celebrating, why not join the celebration, but go, this is why we are celebrating.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So the actual day is, like you said, based on the shepherds, based on the birth of John the Baptist, who's Jesus's cousin, and looking at the calendar of when that took place and the contributing factors of when that was announced, when it was born, the time in which, how old John the Baptist was when Mary delivered the news to Elizabeth that she was pregnant and John the Baptist leapt in the womb and all that, you know. So there's just so many of those things that we look at for cues to realize that he wasn't born in December. Yeah. But I don't know that we can specifically say when it was. You can read some very smart people that are way smarter than either of us that would say he was born in the fall. And then you read other really smart people that would say he's born in the spring. Yeah. So based off of those type of cues, like somewhere in that window of like, I don't know, May to September, October-ish is probably when Jesus was actually born.
Yeah. And that's, and to a much larger, I think this question raises a much larger conversation that it doesn't change who Jesus is.
Correct.
It doesn't change the method of birth. It doesn't change him growing up, right? Like it doesn't change any of that. It doesn't challenge my theology. This isn't a brick. Like my theology isn't built on this brick of Jesus was born on the 25th. And so when somebody goes, oh, well, that was a pagan, right? Why are they using the word pagan? Nobody ever uses that word until it is something that's being lobbed in a I
think we should bring it back. We should start calling stuff pagan.
Man, yeah. It's so bad. It's so bad. But reality is like it's being used as part of an agenda, right? Because it's a word that gets a reaction.
Yeah.
And so for me, if the story was different of the church was celebrating this day, and on this day they decided to, hey, we're going to be intentional to celebrate the birth of Jesus, nobody would have a problem with it. But the minute you hear, wait, this was a pagan holiday, have you seen the world? The entire world, for the most part, where you have access to any kind of media, celebrates Christmas. And I'm pretty sure the whole world are not believers. So we could still say today that there's a whole bunch of people who are, we never use this word, but pagan, that still celebrate. And it's like, why am I going to let this be something that on my faith becomes now something that makes my faith questionable? Right. Or like the truth of the matter is Jesus was born of a virgin. We have that story absolutely clear, right?
Yeah. But, I had a guy one time come to me and he wanted to use it as that challenge. You know, it was just kind of like he was going to lob a grenade into my faith or whatever.
Yeah. Which is what social media is doing, right? Like it's lobbing it in the middle and going, well, what do you think about this?
Well, and it was so funny because when he came to me and he's like, well, you know, Jesus wasn't actually even born December 25th and you guys say he was. So there you go. And I just looked at him and was like, oh yeah, I know. And he was like so disarmed. Like he was waiting for me to like defend it and then he could get in an argument. I was like, oh no, it's very clear he wasn't born on December 25th. And he's like, really? Like, yeah, we all know. He's all, well, I didn't know that. I'm like, doesn't change the fact that Jesus was born of a virgin, came to this earth, died on a cross for our sins. Like, you know,
it doesn't change that.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that whole like, wait, what? You're not bothered by this? Why does this not? And I think that's one of those where you go, if God wanted us to know, it'd be there.
Yeah.
Right. And there's guesses like you just walked through. There's guesses we can make to the fall, to December, to the spring. Like the important thing is that we slow down and we go, hey, I'm celebrating here because of the miracle of God becoming human.
Yeah. Erica had something to be aware of.
It's a great question.
Great question. Thank you so much for asking that to us. And hopefully that answers. I mean, it doesn't give you a specific answer because we don't know.
I don't know if we helped you understand or confused you more. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's good. Well, guys, if you were with us this weekend, whether you were watching online or in person, we are continuing to walk through Advent and super excited about being able to look at Advent and maybe a little bit of a different context than we normally do. But this idea of joy and peace and hope is just that they're pie in the sky ideas, but they can actually be tangible and real because Jesus is happy to be with us. Yeah. God is happy to be with us. His face is upon us. Like that. That's incredible to do that. And this weekend we talked about hope. And one of the things you said was hope is not a wish.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get that backwards. How do you think sometimes we miss or misuse hope that is found in Jesus and we turn it into that wish?
Yeah, I think we, first of all, we confuse the word, right? We alternate the word. And because if we said wish when we really mean wish, it would have a different feel, right? But when we say hope, like then people around you begin to believe that this could happen. Mm-hmm. When I say a wish, people are like, it might not. You know, there's no guarantee. I was thinking about the, was it Make-A-Wish? I know they still do it, but it used to be that you would hear the stories a lot more than you used to, where, you know, somebody's going through just the worst life can offer, right? Like and this foundation comes along and allows them to make a wish, right? Well, that's actually hope because it's based on something, right? Like it's based on this versus I'm going through something and I'm like, I wish I could go to the Dominican Republic, right? Like just a different setting, but it has to do with, I think where it gets confused is when we remove the object, right? Then it becomes something that we misuse hope for. Yeah. Because now it's probably switched to more of an outcome versus I walked away from the weekend going like really challenged for me personally going, man, am I using hope towards outcomes or am I truly going, hey, I have hope. I hold hope because Jesus is happy to be with me in it. Right.
Yeah. And I think we can quit when it comes to the wish, it's easy to put it into even monetary terms or something like that. But I've had conversations with people that are like, God's going to get me a car. And I have hope that he's going to do it. And it's like, well, so he's your Santa Claus in the sky that you're just like, here's my Christmas list. But God's going to come through because God is faithful and you're projecting on him and assigning a definition of hope that it never was meant to be. Yeah. I have hope that you're going to do, like you're holding God hostage or something. He's not going to give you what you want just because you say you have hope in him, because that's not what hope means.
Yeah. Well, it's super subtle, right? So God is all powerful. So I have all powerful, back to your thing of Santa Claus, but switch it to genie. I have an all powerful genie that I am in relationship with. And so it's easy to go, I hope this all powerful God comes through and so then instead of saying wish, I go, I hope that my financial future is brand new car, is 3 years from now, I'm going to be financially secure, versus going, hope is actually, wait, I have the all powerful God in it with me. Yes. That gives my heart hope in life. It energizes right here and now. And I think it's just one of those where it's so subtle. Yeah. And it's kind of hard to understand until you slow down and go, okay, am I hoping in God or am I hoping in, hey, I know you're this, so I'll get this? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just such a good reminder for us to understand that he's with us and it's not just all about the outcome, because that's what we do. And again, please nobody send an email and say that God, that I said God can't do anything. Like God can give you a new car. Like I'm not limiting what God can do, but I think when we start, making demands of God, we've missed what a hope is. When,
you just reminded me that there's a line with Mary where it says, no word from the Lord will ever fail. There's a big difference in a word from the Lord and me telling the Lord what to do. Right. Right. Like, and that's what you're just saying. Like, like there's a huge difference when God goes, hey, I'm giving you a future and this is what it looks like. And that's from the Lord, not from, okay, well, man, my hope is in the word from the Lord versus me going, God, I want this future.
Yeah.
And you're going to make it happen. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it just comes because a lot of times our hope is in the outcome, not in the person of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. We miss Jesus completely.
We miss Jesus completely. And our hope isn't in the outcome. Even with more serious things. I mean, we talk about getting a new car and somebody probably needs a new car and it's serious to them. Yeah. But what about sickness? When we really hope that somebody is healed.
Yeah.
And then they're not.
Yeah.
Is our hope gone?
Yeah.
Is Jesus, did he not come through?
Yeah.
When we realize hope isn't in the outcome.
Yeah.
It's in the person of Jesus.
I got to talk to a lady this weekend. I think it was a week and a half ago, if I remember the timeline right. She lost her mom. And she was standing there telling me how much peace she has. Mm-hmm. And how, as I began to listen, there was other things going on with her husband's mom at the same time with hospitalization. And, mm-hmm. and it was just this beautiful, she was so calm and so emotional, but not run by her emotions, if that makes sense. Like you could just see her foundation was rock steady. And as I listened, it's the reality that Jesus was with her through it all, right? It wasn't the outcome she wants. Obviously she wants her mom still here, but she was able to also say, because Jesus is happy to be with me and because I know who Jesus is, I can be happy for my mom because she's with Jesus, right? Like, and that future is secure. And so it was this really interesting, here's somebody in the midst of, some of the hardest grief we face, the loss of somebody who's so close. And yet in that, back to your point last week with peace, right? Like in those moments, there's this inner stability, this inner, and in the case of hope, she still has hope because Jesus is still happy to be with her today.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's super good. And back to that exact thing is, God doesn't abandon us in bad situations. That is so good to know. We walked through multiple passages this weekend where we saw that he's with them and he doesn't abandon. My question is, how do we continue to remind ourselves of that though? Because when we're in those bad situations, we know God's not abandoning me, but sometimes we just feel so stinking alone. How do we remind ourselves of that in those situations?
Yeah. I think for me, it's community. I think the people I surround myself with, or probably a better way to say this, God surrounded me with, I find that those people will remind me of those things, right? Yeah. And it comes back to somewhat, depending on who you surrounded yourself with, you may get a version of, I'm uncomfortable with that. You may get a version of, hey, I'm going to remind you in the midst, but I'm going to walk with you in it. And so I think scripture is a huge one.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm very visual. And so there's sometimes I just need to put it on my home screen. There's times when I need to put it on my mirror. There's times when I need to put it in my notebook, and have these reminders of whether it's I'm in a bad situation, I need to be reminded of truth, or even just simple things like I need to be reminded of who I am and who I'm becoming. And so what is that, right? Like, what does that look like in the midst of whatever's happening?
Yeah. And I love this weekend, you said so cliche, Psalm 23.
Yeah.
But man, that is such a good passage for
How many old people have you met that are like Psalm 23?
Psalm 23. Oh yeah. That's my jam.
Yeah. It's like a consistent thing that you're like, it's so cliche. Like
it's so cliche, but it is so good. Yeah. When you were reading it this weekend, I'm going, man, we could break this down and do a 6-week series just through this passage. It's so good. And I would say a good reminder of hope is to just read Psalm 23.
Yeah.
How simple is that? Like,
you can't get past the first line without the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing.
Yeah. And then, but life's really hard right now though.
Yeah.
Well, even when you're going through your darkest valley, there he is.
The shadow of death.
The shadow of death. Like, it's just so good. I would even go as far to say...
do you ever think the guy... So David's writing, right? You ever think David's writing and he gets to that part and he's like, the shadow of death. He's like, ooh, that's good.
That's good. That's a good line right there. I know. He's like, people are going to be preaching about this someday. I would even go as far to challenge anyone listening right now to just read Psalm 23 every day this week, or pick a week for the next 7 days from wherever you're listening to this now. Just read Psalm 23 every day and tell me you don't have more hope.
Confidence in God.
And confidence in God.
Absolutely.
A reminder
which you
of
go
hope
back
in
to
the
hope,
storm.
right? Confident expectation.
Yeah.
What is my confident expectation of God? Well, the next part talks about he's going to help me lie down and rest, right? So my confident expectation, he's going to provide the rest that I need.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's going to, and if need be, he'll make me, right? He's going to lead me by still waters, right? Like there's going to be moments where, and so all of a sudden, and then you get to the rod and staff and it's like, man, his protection and his guidance are with me. And then the last part of, his goodness will follow me all the days of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, if you're not uplifted by, what I mean? And so I agree with you. I think, especially through I haven't thought about this, but through the Christmas season, so many people are disappointed.
Yeah.
Didn't work out with family the way they planned. The celebration of the day ended up being whatever. We ended up in the hospital with a kid, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so chaotic. I didn't get the present that I wanted. It didn't fit. It didn't, whatever it happens to be. Like, we're human. Things disappoint us. Well, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. That's going to reframe me instantly.
So good. So good. Random story I got to throw in here, though.
Let's go.
Christmas disappointment. So I have had this.
There's a conversation like the trivia.
Yeah. Right. So the Apple Watch that I have is the first generation one. I've had this thing for like 10 years now.
Does it still connect?
It still works, but it's struggling.
Okay.
And so I've kind of been saving up going, man, I want to get a new one. So on Black Friday.
Did you want me to tell you a story about your watch?
Ordered on Amazon.
I look over and it's got a red dot on the side. I'm like, what gen is that?
Oh, it's like the first one.
Like not even thinking it was old, like a new one that they.
Oh yeah, it's so old. People think it's new now. Well, I've been saving up, so I got a really good deal, Amazon Black Friday, and was like, this is awesome. And so it showed up at the house while I was in the DR. So I get back and my wife's like, hey, it's here. So this morning I open it. The box is empty.
What?
Somebody somewhere along the shipping line had stolen the Apple Watch.
No.
Literally the band and the Apple Watch gone. And I have this empty box of Apple product. They make nice boxes, but that's not what I want.
It's a great box.
So Christmas,
just strap the box to your wrist.
Go. Yeah, that's all I can do at this point. Yeah. And then we're like, well, we're going to get our money back, but it was a Black Friday deal. So if I got my money back and still went to go buy a new one, it's more than what
so
I got it for. I know. Christmas disappointment. I need to read Psalm 23.
What, Amazon give you a refund on that?
We're still working on it. Like, yeah, they told us like, okay, you got to return it. I'm like, return the box. Okay, we'll return the box. Right. But yeah, so that was just this morning. So
random fact about Amazon, because I don't know if Rachel's this way, but Cindy orders stuff off Amazon and then we'll return it like, no problem. I heard that, and maybe I need to be fact checked on this. I don't know, but Amazon, when you return something, it goes to a warehouse. It never goes back to the shelf.
Really?
Yeah. And so there's like warehouses. David's agreeing with me. And so there's warehouses and stuff. And do they sell it off cheap or do they give it away? I don't remember. Amazon returns.
Wow.
Business empire built on Amazon returns. So you're going to return a box. So
I'm going to return a box. And
what does the box become?
Somebody will buy it. I don't know.
Somebody buys the next Apple Watch. It's empty.
The next empty Apple Watch.
Oh my God. So good. Psalm 23.
Psalm 23. Read it. It'll help you through this difficult season.
Through the empty boxes of Christmas.
I do want to hit on this real quick before we go to another submitted question that we have.
Okay.
But you finished your message this weekend talking about the idea of being real.
Yeah.
And that is one of the topics that really just I love because we're so fake in church. How many times are people hopeless? Specifically with this topic of hope. How many times are they hopeless? But when they walk into a church and somebody asks them how they're doing, their response is, everything's fine. God is good.
So good.
You know? Yeah.
So good.
Praise God. God is good.
Yeah.
Better than I should.
Yeah.
All those things. And it's like, man, why can't we be real? If we are able to be real, I believe that we are then opening ourselves up to be able to receive that hope that because if we say we don't need it, but we really do.
You know, my favorite response when people are like, oh, it's so good. What makes it good?
Yeah.
What's made it good? And then it's not long before you're like, they either really have something that's made it good, or they're like, I'm not sure. Actually, this week, you know what I mean? Like it just forces them to catch themselves in the robotic kind of response.
I think it's just a great challenge for all of us in the being real thing. It's like, man, be real. Life's hard. Joy, peace, hope. Yeah. They're fleeting and hard when we put it in the wrong thing. And often we put in our joy, peace, and hope in the wrong thing.
And was it last week we talked about recentering? Was that last week on the pod? So. I think for me, the be real, for me personally, this is what I walked away from the weekend with. It was a recentering for me on praying for Cindy, right? Like that I can easily slip into this belief that, I hear so many stories. My wife was sick for 9 years. I was just listening to a different podcast where lead communicator at a church, his wife was sick for over a decade, and then overnight God healed her, right? And I can easily slip into the hope being, well, overnight God's going to heal her. Yeah. Versus the hope being, wait, Jesus is in this with us every single day, and he's happy to be here. Yeah. Right? And holding on to that. And so I just think for me, I walked away recentered from the weekend going, hey, I need to be careful I don't slip into other people's stories of what God's done and make it mine, but live the story that God's got me in now.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. Well, we do have another question. Last question that we have for the podcast today. The question was submitted anonymously. So Anonymous asks from Annie.
Okay.
Here we go. Recently, we visited family, and my kind-hearted 28-year-old niece showed up looking like a demonic goth. Her dad, who's submitting the question is this person's brother, refused to even be in the same room as her. Her mother and I tried talking to her about it, but she told us she wants to project weird and just laughed at us. She goes to a church where they sit around and speak if they want to, but there's no leadership and no sermons, and it's just whatever anyone wants to say, which I don't think is biblical. I know there's a lot of reasons for her behavior, but my family is very disturbed by it. Any suggestions on what to do?
First of all, whoever Annie is, I hope you're listening. This is coming as just a dad who's had kids in college. When they come home, I can't imagine if, and I'll use Sierra, but I can't imagine if warm, sweet, beautiful Sierra goes to college, comes back cold, disconnected, and appearance is completely changed. Like that, the weight of that, the shock of that, the unknown of that. If there was, and I'm reading it this way, that there was no heads up if this was coming. Yeah, that's a big, as a parent to navigate. Yeah. That's a hard one, and everybody's kind of reeling at that point. I am curious. Maybe you've got insight, like demonic goth. What comes to mind? Like, is that? I'm just curious what, because obviously goth is dark.
Yeah. So
what makes it demonic?
With the question, I don't know if there's any more context with that or anything. What comes to mind with me with that picture is probably someone just dressed in, probably heavily dressed in black and trying to, maybe even going for the shock value of, hey, this is, and she said that in here in the question wise is that she wants to project weird. And so
which I'm not
she's
even
going
sure
for that.
What projecting weird.
Yeah,
we're all weird.
I do a lot of that. I don't mean to, but I do a lot of that.
Hang around, we're all weird.
Yeah.
So first of all, the pain of it, I get it. The shock of it, I get it. I think there's a couple of things. Like obviously, she's going to church where there's no leadership. There's nobody leading the conversation. I don't know if that means they're using the Bible or not. I'm going to assume not, and it's more conversational around whatever the wisest person in the room is type thing. So I would already say, kind of looking at that form of church, there are things biblically that we can look at to go, hey, I don't know if God didn't design it this way, therefore it's not healthy. Like, for example, we have elders who oversee my seat, right? Like, as long as I'm in it. Whoever comes next, they're not going to sit as leaders of the elders. The elders are the leaders of the church, and I'm just one of them. That's a biblical model, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of a leadership structure is, Jesus is very clear. Bible's very clear on what that looks like. Paul was extremely clear on, Jesus is the head of the church, and then the elders, the overseers. And so I think there's some grounds there, but to me, that's not this conversation. I don't think arguing church model is gonna get real far.
Yeah, I think it just gives us some insight to know that she's not getting maybe the wise counsel or biblical,
for sure,
perspective on life. That
for sure,
yeah.
And I think there's so much here that's for me hard to kind of pull apart, because I feel like we're having to make judgments based on like the idea of projecting weird. That's an outcome versus a comfort of who I am and choices I'm making of why, right? Like, I'm projecting this for you. I'm doing this not for me, but for something else. And again, that's just a judgment, right? So how do you navigate all that? How do you walk all that? I think what the phrase that comes to mind is love listens. How can you listen? Like where can you, I would say if there's been a change, something has happened to bring that change, go and understand what that is, because that's going to help you get to the root of understanding what the drastic change has been. And it's a niece, right? If I remember right. Yeah. So the drastic change in a niece and her niece, that's come from something as there's a backstory.
Yeah.
So slowing down to understand the backstory, slowing down to understand and ask more. I would say questions are your best friend. I don't think it's a lack of knowledge. It sounds like she's grown up with plenty of truth, so I don't think it's you arguing finer points of the Bible. I think it's you going in and going, man, as a human, what's got you to this point that you're shifting away from, right? There's a movement away from. And it's a pretty drastic one. So what's in that backstory?
Yeah.
And I would take time to be there. I think, I don't know the dad, but as a dad, I would, I get the shock. I get not being in the same room. I can understand it. I would just encourage, be present. If we go back to even what we were just talking about, right? Like Jesus is happy to be with me, even when I am in my state.
Yeah.
And so I just think, for the dad, just an encouragement to him and any other family members, like be present. Don't respond like this is weird, but actually sit and go, okay, help me understand who you are now.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts?
I just think anytime somebody does something for that shock value, it's because they're trying to cry for help.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
And so I think the worst thing you can do is to ignore,
you
isolate.
See it like you're in the youth world.
Yeah.
Like where do you see this in a different sense? Like the cry for help. What's a different context you would see it in?
Well, I mean, not even just in the cry for help part of it, but again, back to the action warranting a response. I think anytime we do something that is out of the ordinary, it's to get a response from that.
Yeah.
And the response is usually to fulfill what they need in that. For instance, when you say something out of the ordinary for a laugh.
Yeah.
Well, trying to get the laugh is trying to fulfill this validation for me going, man, I'm going to say something crazy in this situation.
Yeah.
And it's an action, but what's trying to produce is to fill this hole of I want validation.
Yeah.
So I think in this situation, it's like, man, I'm going to do something crazy here. And the reason is because I'm hurting in this other area that I need. And I think that the trap we fall into is walking away when we should be walking towards.
Yeah.
So the advice of like, man, what do we do? My family's really disturbed. And like, our dad won't even talk to her. It's like, well, that's actually we need to flip that and go, well, let me lean in right here.
Yeah.
I just think of it as, good. Man, if every time I did something that was a step away from God, the church, people, and nobody stepped towards me.
Yeah.
I would never be restored. And the truth is God stepped towards all of us when we stepped away.
It's good.
Right. So God is still pursuing, God is still doing that. I think that a family member's role in this is to, and again, so much harder to do than just to say it. So I can say this without the emotional attachment to all of this situation, but like, this is where you go.
So Remy shows up at Christmas.
Right. Yeah. And so one of my daughters shows up and then it's like, well,
I was thinking more Remy at her current age.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Can you imagine my 2-year-old showing up? And I mean, yeah, sometimes she just refuses to wear clothes. I mean, that's about as far as I can go with her, but, yeah, so I don't have the emotional attachment with it, but I would just say this is the time to lean in, and in spite of how she's acting, going like, hey, I'm going to show up anyway.
Yeah.
And it sounds like if she's doing it for the reaction of, well, I just want to project weird. And, you know, for me, I want for you to isolate so that I can just give you more ammo or have more ammo for why you don't care or whatever.
Yep.
Flip the script, just show up, lean in. I think about, I have a couple cousins who this relates to pretty clearly, in just their lifestyle, but even their physical appearance that kind of leans into the lifestyle that they're in and stuff. Yeah. And my dad oftentimes, super clean cut, conservative Christian dad that I have, sometimes I'll call him and I'm like, what are you up to? And he's like, oh, I just finished having lunch with this person or that person that's totally living a different lifestyle and everything else. And I'm like, well, what'd you do? He's like, oh, we just had lunch and hung out.
So great.
And it's so different from, I mean, it's the odd couple for sure. If you saw my dad and my cousin sitting in a restaurant together. But I think just showing up and showing that you care through the midst of the change and through the midst of all of that, I think is, speaks more than any advice that you're going to want to give or counseling that you're going to want to give.
Yep. So good. Yeah, I think for me, the picture that comes to mind as you're saying that is 18-and-a-half-year-old John goes to live with his brother in Wisconsin. And I was projecting everything to try and get a shock out of him. So I'd tell him the stupidest stories that I'd done, whether it be, you know, out with drugs or with people or whatever, right? Like just a shock value.
Yeah.
And he never flinched. Like he just listened, and I could tell, like now I'm like, oh, he must have thought I was such a idiot, right? Like, and yet at the time I didn't know I was doing it for shock value. I look back and go, oh, I absolutely was. Yeah. Because I was trying to push him away. I was trying to go, well, if you're not going to accept me, then it's better that I know that now.
Yeah.
Right. Because I had such an insecurity of acceptance. And so within that, then for him, he just loved me. He just listened. He would ask questions. He never, like I said, he never flinched. He just stayed steady through it and just continued. We continued to, at that point I couldn't work. So we did a motor route together and we'd eat McDonald's and joke about whatever. And what we were doing, newspaper thing, come home, play video games, like hang out, play soccer at night. Like it was just this, I don't know what his wife thought of all that because he was only a year into his marriage at that point. But that's what showed me Jesus to a point that I ended up actually going, man, I need to get my life right with Jesus, right? I need to see Jesus for who he is.
Yeah.
And I would say the same in this context, right? Like, how can you not flinch? So let her throw everything that is as weird as it can possibly be at you, and you don't flinch. You just continue to love, listen, walk alongside. Don't condone the behavior. My brother never condoned the behavior. He never said, "Oh man, right, that was a really good choice." Like he never said that. And yet he never moved away. He moved towards. And so I agree with you. I think how can you do that? And in the meantime, like give grace. And the other thought that came to mind was the people Jesus sat with.
Yeah, I was just thinking Jesus with the woman at the well.
Yeah.
Where she's like, where's your husband? He's like, where's your husband? And she's like, oh, I don't have one. He's like, yeah, you've had a bunch.
Yeah.
You've had a ton of them.
Yeah.
Like, you're a mess. And then he's like, oh, but I still love you.
Yeah.
Like he knew.
Well, and she even tries to throw him off, right? Like,
yeah.
What are you, a prophet? Yeah. Like our ancestors say that we should worship here, like on this mountain or in Jerusalem.
No. Let me talk to you about what matters. No, that's good. Well, Annie, anonymous with this question.
Hopefully that helps.
Hopefully that helps.
Sorry.
This is a serious situation,
so
and thank you for being vulnerable enough to ask that question, and hopefully it's been helpful as you work through that. But
I think as you were saying that, I think that's one of the beauties of the pod in this form is you don't have emotion attached, right? So it allows both of us to be able to, hey, this is best advice I've got, but it's not driven by connection, which is great.
There it is. So if you do have a question, you can submit it. Is that a good segue for that one? There you go. Submit it unedited at heightschurch.com. Unedited at heightschurch.com. In the meantime, please share, rate, review.
You have 2 weeks to do it.
Let people know. You got 2 weeks to do it.
So every time you come back and you don't see a new one, click an old one and hit like or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the time of the podcast, though, where I get to push the fake button. There it is. There's the sound. You've made it to the end of the podcast. If you've made it to the end of the podcast, you're a part of an exclusive club.
So in 2 weeks, you think David will have a...
No, he will not.
Exclusive club sound?
I promise you he will not. But you've made it to the end of the podcast club, and that just means that you are more special than other people that stopped before this point. So thank you guys for making it this far with us. We love you all. We are so appreciative and grateful that you listen and share and rate and review and tell us how awesome this has been for you, because it fuels us to want to keep doing it. So,
and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. We hope you have a wonderful Christmas. We will see you at our Christmas services, 23rd and 24th at 2 p.m., 4 p.m., or 6 p.m. There's a lot of options for you there. If you cannot make it in person, we will be streaming the 4 p.m. to our online location, so you can definitely be a part of it through that.
And what about this? So if you are there Christmas Eve or Christmas Eve and you listen to the pod, come find Todd or me and say hey.
Say hey.
Say hey.
You'll get a high five.
It's always fun to put faces to who's actually paying attention to the pod.
That's good. That's good stuff. All right. You guys have a great week. Love you.
Love you.